Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Feingold here with our weekly lecture series. This is Great Players of the Present with Alexei Shirov. That may confuse some of you, but remember, you were confused before you came to this lecture, so it had nothing to do with me. But the reason it's confusing is the verbiage I use. When I lectured last week about Morozevich, I called it Great Players of the Past. The reason was, and Morozevich is younger than Shirov. I guarantee it. And if I'm wrong, then I still guarantee it. It just guarantees no good. Morozevich doesn't play in tournaments anymore. So I called him Great Players of the Past because he doesn't play anymore. And that's actually, I got a lot of flack when I called the Ginger GM, Simon Williams, Great Players of the Past, because Simon Williams plays like once a year or never because he's busy with his internet stuff. Now Shirov, he plays all the time, and he didn't stop playing. You could argue, which I would make this argument if I called it Great Players of the Past, that he was great in the past and now he's not. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say Great Players of the Present. That way you guys can complain on YouTube. If you don't complain on YouTube, what are you going to do? You got to do something. Okay, now if you like complaining, then, and my dogs like complaining, okay, they're barking like grandmasters. They must have got accused of cheating by Kramnik or something. Shirov plays for different countries, some that no longer exist. So he played for the Soviet Union until 1991, and he's Latvian, he's born in Latvia, and he played for Latvia 91 to 95. Then he played for Spain 1995 to 2011. Then he went back to Latvia 2011 to 18, and now 2018 to now he plays for Spain again. And you might say, why does it matter what country he plays for? It matters for the Olympiad. So he's either board one for Latvia or board one for Spain. And he could be board two because he's in his early 50s now, but he plays for Spain now. He speaks fluent Spanish, and he lives in Spain and Latvia, and he sort of changes his mind what country he's playing for, depending on the situation, I guess. Okay, and Shirov was very strong as a junior, and he won the World Under-16 Championship in 1988 and came second in the World Junior Championship in 1990 when he became a Grandmaster. He's won too many international tournaments to mention. He's won lots and lots of international tournaments. At his peak, Shirov was the second-ranked player in the world. That was in 94? Yeah. And he was supposed to play, he's won candidates matches and, very strong tournaments. And you can read a lot about him and his personal life. He was married to a chess grandmaster, Kamiltie, and I pronounced her name wrong because she's Lithuanian. First name is Victoria, but her second name is Cmilyte, which I can't pronounce because I'm American. And then he's married for the third time at least, and I think he always marries chess players. Although I'm not sure if his first wife was a chess player, but his current wife and his last wife were. I've been married 3 times as well, so we're tied for first. He studied with Tal in his youth, and I remember, give you a personal story because, it's my lecture. Shabalov, who's an American grandmaster, also from Latvia, he told me of the times they would go to Tal's house, and it would be Shabalov, Shirov, Tal, and maybe a couple of other guys. Maybe I haven't even heard of them. And they would study chess all day. And this was before computers, so they would have chess games on paper, and Shabalov said they would look at 100 games a day and analyze them, the 4 or 5 of them. So Shirov got pretty good at attacking, analyzing with Tal, and so did Shabalov. Okay, and then he has a very famous game which is in his Wikipedia. He's written a couple of books, Shirov's Best Games and Fire on Board. Well, the first book is called Fire on Board 2. also, I mean. And then Fire on Board Part 2, First Blood. Okay, and we'll save that for the end because I want to talk about that more than just what Wikipedia says about his most famous game. Okay, so currently Shirov's 51. Okay, and he was born on the 4th of July, so he must be very patriotic to the U.S. Okay, or maybe not. Okay, so as you all know, unless you don't, Shirov plays wild, crazy attacking chess. How does he get away with it? He's really good at calculating, and he learned how to play wild and crazy chess and still maintain control from Mikhail Tal. He studied with as a youth, and a lot of players, but not Shirov, they play wild and crazy when they're young, and then when they get older, they don't. A good example of that is Anand. Anand played like a maniac when he was a kid. He was sacrificing and playing unusual openings and craziness, and he outcalculated everybody, so he won. And then as Anand got older, he played 100 moves of theory, he had novelties ready, and he was world champion several times because he knew all the theory and more and played excellent chess. And Shirov didn't do that. He plays as wild and crazy as he ever has. That's the way he plays chess. And because of that, if you listen to different lectures on Shirov's best games, I'm not sure if you can do that, but if you could, the grandmasters who give these lectures probably would look at different games. There's so many games to pick from. And I picked games I didn't know because I know a lot of Shirov's best games. I wanted to find best games I hadn't seen before because I'm as excited as you guys about seeing Shirov dismantle super GMs by playing crazy. Okay, so first game, he's playing Loek van Wely, who's a top Dutch grandmaster, and he's played in Tata Steel and what it was called before that many times in Vikonsé as being one of the top 2 or 3 players in the Netherlands. Actually, Loek van Wely was my teammate when we were both IMs in the Dutch interclubs in 1988, 1989, 1990. And Loek van Wely, who's approximately 6'5", when I first met him, I was taller than him. And then I wasn't, because I think he was 14 when I first met him. Okay, so this is his game with van Wely, who has a similar style to Shirov. He plays for tactics, aggression, complications. So we're always going to see an exciting game when Shirov plays van Wely. Okay, so let me click here. Okay, so they played a Sicilian, and Shirov played knight c3, which is a little unusual, and after knight f6, d4 would transpose to the regular open Sicilian variations, but Shirov played bishop b5. So already we're playing non-standard variation, and bishop b5 is supposed to be a good move, so this isn't a bad position. And I discussed this position coincidentally in my course on bishop b5 Sicilian. Okay, he played queen c7. That defends the knight, so try not to double your pawns. Castles, e6, rook e1, knight g4. As I said, van Wely doesn't develop his pieces in castle necessarily. Sometimes he plays for the attack. Now, the point of knight g4 is black wants to play knight d4, and he wants to get rid of the white knight on f3 and then play queen h2 check. And the other idea is the knight can go back to e5 if it gets kicked later. Okay, Shirov always plays the most aggressive. He took the knight so that black can't play knight to d4, and van Wely kept his queen on c7 in case he has to play knight e5. If he had taken with the queen, then his queen's not defending e5 anymore. Okay, so e5 was played, trying to cut off the queen and knight tandem that black has. Black never played f6, which sort of gives the result of the game away. This game was played in 2002, 2003. My rules didn't exist then. I knew them, but I didn't tell anybody. Okay, he played d4, because Shirov always plays the most aggressive, most complicated move that he can calculate. And you can see White's king is relatively safe and Black's king is in the center and isn't castling very soon, or possibly ever. Okay, so he takes on d4. That's the whole point of the Sicilian. Queen takes d4, which attacks the knight on g4 and defends the pawn. Then they did lots of trading. Takes. Shirov doesn't want to trade queens. Black does have the two bishops and more center pawns, but Black's king is very suspicious. So he takes with a rook, and Shirov is hoping to attack von Wely before von Wely gets to castle. Bishop e7, von Wely wants to castle. Bishop g5. Now in this position we can't castle because you lose your bishop on e7. That's silly. And if we take and castle, then we get checkmated and won. So he's basically saying, I'm stopping you from castling. And I want to get rid of your nice bishop on e7 and leave you with this terrible bishop on c8. Terrible. Okay, so von Wely played bishop d6. And even though my rules weren't around yet, Shirov knows all of my rules, like always sack the exchange. He didn't play rook e5 to move his rook back to e1. So he played bishop f4, and he said, take that rook, I dare you, I double dare you. If he takes, he'll take with the bishop, forking the queen and the g-pawn, and the black king is going to be in a bad place, and my knight can try to go to d6. In fact, not only could it try to go to d6, okay, and then Black's bishop again is terrible, and Black has no development, just his queen's running around getting attacked. So von Wely didn't like that exchange sacrifice acceptance. So he played c5 attacking the queen, and now he could take the exchange again if he wanted to, but he played a6 because he's preventing knight b5. If it was White's move, knight b5 would have ended the game. Okay, knight d5. If I can't play knight b5, I'm going to play knight d5. And you can guess a lot of Shirov's moves by trying to find the most aggressive one. That attacks the queen, and taking the knight is illegal because of the pin. So he moved his queen. Makes sense. And then rook g5, threatening the pawn on g7, making castling look sort of dangerous. And again, you can't take this knight because the e-pawn's pinned and the rook defends it, so you can't take with the queen. Okay, so he played h6, and he said, I have an idea. Why don't you take my pawn and I'll take your knight? I don't know if he said that, but he was definitely thinking it. Okay, and Shirov played bishop takes d6. He really wants to sacrifice the exchange. He's like, would you please take my rook? I'm trying to sacrifice the exchange. And von Wely says, all right, I'll take your rook. Takes the rook. And he plays rook d1. All of White's pieces are attacking, and rook d1 is a brilliant move, saving both of his minor pieces. You still can't take because it's pinned. If you take with the queen, you lose your queen. You can't even take the rook. And if you take the bishop on d6, White can play knight f6 check. And then I think Black should play king e7 and then king takes rook. And I don't like Black's position here because Black's king is running around and Black's pieces are ineffective. And this pawn's weak, this pawn's weak, this pawn's weak. And the queen and knight are going to have their say. And so von Wely didn't like any of that after rook d1. You can't castle, it's illegal. So he played rook h6. Okay, defense. He's defending his e-pawn more, and he's defending the third rank. So by defending both of these squares with the rook, White can never play queen g6 check or queen h5 check, except when he did it later. But we didn't get to that point yet. Okay, knight e7, attacking the queen, a very unusual move in a chess game. White playing knight e7 in the middle game. The queen went to a4, very aggressive, and something very interesting happened. White played queen f3, attacking the rook on a8, and if Black saves his rook, probably White would move his knight to g6 and play queen f8 mate, with the bishop defending f8. Always defend f8. Okay, so Shirov Von Wely doesn't really have a chance to move his rook. Rook a7 hangs the bishop, and then white's threatening knight takes rook and queen f8 mate, and white's up material. And I think white could also play knight g6, stopping rook f6, because the rook can't jump over the knight. And then I'm going to try to play mate next move. And by try to play mate next move, I'm going to play mate next move. Okay, so we can't really save our rook. So Von Wely played bishop b7, attacking the queen on f3. So white doesn't have time to get queen f8 made in, because he has to move his knight to do that. But his queen's attacked. So he took the bishop, threatening the rook. The rook went to d8 because it has to. And now white's up material and attacking. Knight g8, setting up for the next game. Now, if they play another game with colors reversed, the knight's already in the right place. That attacks the rook on h6. So he played rook h8. Seems good. And then Shirov finished the game quickly. That's why he played knight g8. He played queen f3, and he's threatening queen f8 mate. There's not really a good way to stop that except for rook takes knight. And Von Wely could have resigned here, but he played rook takes knight. Okay, that's the only move to stop queen f8 mate that's reasonable. Queen h5 check. Black has one legal move, so he played it. Here he resigned. I thought he played g6, then he resigned after queen h7. And now after queen h7, which this didn't happen, Von Wely resigned, the rook is hanging with checkmate, and you can't defend the rook. And moving the rook here or here is useless, because not only can I take it, but I mate you. And if you move it here, I don't take the rook, I go check, and then mate. Or if it was me, I would repeat again to torture him a little, and then mate him. Yeah, that's mean. Okay, so it's forced mate. So after queen h5 check, Von Wely resigned. One of the reasons I like sacking the exchange so much, and that Shirov does, is look at the bishop compared to either black rook. Okay, and you always hear a rook is worth 5 and a bishop is worth 3. Okay, no rook is better than that bishop. And those rooks aren't better than any minor piece. And in the middle game, when there's an attack, your minor pieces are better than your rooks. So always sack the exchange. And then by sacking the exchange and the game not going into an end game, Shirov won very easily. Okay, and that brilliance where he's sacking material and attacking his opponent's king, that happens a lot. When I do it, my opponents have 3-digit ratings. When Shirov does it, his opponents are 27, 2800, and he still crashes through. Okay, next game, Shirov is black, so let's flip the board. This is against Michael Adams. Michael Adams, a very solid player. This was played in Biel in 1991. Biel has a Super GM and GM tournaments every year in the summer. I went there once in 1993, and I think Shirov was there. Okay, Michael Adams has been one of the 3 best players in Great Britain for 35 years. Maybe not 35 years, maybe only 30 years. Yeah, 30 years, Michael Adams has been top 3 in the UK and mainly number 1, mainly. Okay, and he has white. Michael Adams is very solid, doesn't lose with white very often. And Shirov plays the most aggressive opening he can think of, the Sicilian Dragon. And he wants to get a very sharp game, complicated. And Adams does something you rarely see. Okay, bishop c4 and castles kingside. People usually don't castle kingside against the dragon. White castles queenside, and both players checkmate each other. But Michael Adams is more solid. He wants to get a positional advantage, not see who gets checkmated first. That's the way Adams plays. Okay, castles. Plays h3. He wants to play bishop e3, but doesn't want to deal with knight to g4. Knight c6. Bishop e3. And this is the longest any Shirov game has gone without mind-boggling tactics. So it's time for mind-boggling tactics. And Shirov played knight takes e4 confusing the audience. And the obvious reason is the fork trick. Knight takes e4, d5, black gets the piece back. Okay, so Michael Adams did something which is usually bad, and it's bad here too. He played bishop takes f7 check. And black has 3 legal moves because I said so. Okay, king h8, king f7, rook f7. And he played the move that's probably the least likely of the 3. So that's how you know the game's complicated. And the reason black played the move he did is black wants extra protection for his queen when the complications flow after what he did. So he took with the king. This way his rook and his knight are protecting his queen, so when things happen in the center, he doesn't have to worry about that. The king's going to go back to g8 anyway. There's no way that white can take advantage on this diagonal. It's just funny to take with the king. You don't expect that. And when this game was played in 1991, I remember seeing this and being like, what? Why did he take with the king? So even though this happened 33 years ago, I remember when he took with the king. The first time I saw the game, I was like, what? Okay, and I haven't seen the game in 33 years, so I don't even know what happened. Knight takes e4, knight takes, bishop takes, and e5. And after bishop e3, he played d5. Now, if black had taken with the rook on f7, then black has no threat here. Black is threatening pawn takes knight because the rook defends the queen. So black has 2 bishops and the better center, so obviously black's better. And black will just play king g8 when he gets a chance. Okay, so knight g3. If knight g5 check, he would have played king g8 and king g8. And that's why black was able to get the pawns in the center, because he took with the king and his rook was defending his queen. Okay, the game continued. c3, Michael Adams plays very solid. Nothing aggressive going on. g5, because he's Shirov. He doesn't want white to play f4, and then if black plays e4, then black's center is ruined. Black loves his pawns on e5 and d5. He doesn't want to play e4 or d4 and mess them up. So he stops f4, then he defends his g-pawn, and Adams says, let's make it complicated because my game is so bad. If nobody does anything, then black has the f-file, black can attack white's king, queen d7 and sacrifice later, and black has the big pawn center. So Adams wants to destroy black's position, plays h4, messing up the king side. Takes on h4, takes on h6. By making it complicated, he hopes to get rid of black's 2 bishops and make the center not as important if all the action's on the king side. Queen f6, bishop g5 with a fork. Shirov has to sacrifice something. He just sacrificed a pawn. That's like the least thing he's ever sacrificed. Rook f5, here comes black's queens and rooks. f4, otherwise black is going to play rook h5 attacking the bishop, and then queen h7, and that's not going to be good. Also, my other rook is coming to f8, so I have lots of attack here against the white king. So he says, Adams says, hey, let's trade everything. Take. Let's trade everything and go into an endgame where I'm a pawn up. Shirov attacks the bishop on h4. Bishop goes to g5. There's not really a good square for the bishop. Bishop e1 looks terrible. Bishop f2 undefends the pawn on f4. And bishop g3 is a little loose. Black could play something like bishop h6 if he wanted. My knight's defending my bishop, and bishop's defending my pawn's pinned. Looks terrible. So he played bishop g5, that prevents bishop h6. Rook f8, getting the last piece into the attack. Rook f2, and now he plays d4. d4 is a brilliant move, and the idea of d4 is to open up this diagonal for my bishop, so my bishop can go to d5 or c4, depending on what white does. So he takes it, takes on f4. The bishop is hanging now. So we can't take with other pieces because we're gonna lose on g5. So he takes with the bishop, and then bishop c4. Okay, and white's pieces are all attacked. Okay, the knight's defending the bishop, but the knight's under attack. And if the bishop moves away, then I can take your rook and your knight's not defended. So like black is threatening everything. He sacrificed 2 pawns, and he also has later threats on d4. For example, if it went bishop takes, queen takes, not only is his bishop hanging, but bishop d4 is winning a lot of material also. So the 2 bishops and the 2 rooks and the queen are having their say, and Michael Adams' rook is still on a1. Okay, I said it was on a1, and then he played bishop e3. It actually doesn't matter what he plays, he's losing material. For example, if you played here, I could take, and if you take with the queen, I could trade queens and take on e3. I could also throw in bishop takes check, because if you play bishop e3, your rook is hanging with check. So all the tactics favor black, and if you take with the rook, then your bishop's not protected. So Adams did the best he could, which wasn't good. He played bishop e3, and that just loses a piece. Rook takes, bishop takes, and takes the knight. And black is up a piece, and black's going to play bishop f3 next move, and pretty soon white is going to get attacked and checkmated. And he's a piece down. So here Michael Adams resigned. A very aggressive game from Shirov, which was famous for the king takes f7 move, but that set up his advance in the center and his advance on the king side, and then white's position was already very bad. And after this game, people stopped playing bishop takes f7 check, because king takes and the way that Shirov played gave black an advantage, so white can't play this way anymore. But that was many years ago.
All right, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
If we were to go all the way back to knight takes e4, I was wondering what you might play if you were white in that position. What do you think might be a better defensive move?
After knight takes e4, if bishop takes is bad, then we have to take the knight or we're a pawn down for nothing. And then d5. And then, unfortunately, what I'd like to do and what I will do are different. I'd like to play bishop d3 and take the pawn, but my knight's hanging. So I would have to take the knight and then play bishop d3 and then take. And black has no problem here because the b2 pawn is hanging. The c6 pawn is also hanging, but white doesn't have any advantage. So probably white can survive this, but Adams was going for the advantage, and he didn't see that black could play d5 and e5 and get the pawn center going with king takes f7. King takes f7 had never been played before, so it was a shock to him that the idea is the rook defends the queen, so we can push all of our pawns and none of them are pinned. But yeah, better is knight takes and knight c6. And then maybe bishop, you could play either bishop d3 or you could try knight d2 and take this, which defends your pawn. But again, I'd rather have black here because of stuff like bishop a6. Probably already terrible for white. So probably bishop d3 is the best. And basically, people don't play this line with white anymore, a lot of it because of this game. This game was 33 years ago. So very few people castle kingside anyway in the dragon. So it's sort of like an old forgotten line, and then after this game, they forgot it more. Remember, always forget. Okay, no, I don't want to get to this game yet. What did I do wrong? Okay, I somehow skipped this game. I don't know what's wrong with me. Okay, this is Shirov white again against Jan Timman. And earlier I was explaining Van Wely was one of the top players in the Netherlands for many years. Before Van Wely, Jan Timman was the best player in Holland for over 20 years. Okay, so, I guess Shirov just plays people who are from Holland. All right, and this was played also in Biel, just like the last game, but this was played in 1995. Okay, and Shirov is white, and they played long theoretical line that actually I know something about. Okay, they played again Mador's favorite. He'll probably steal this video and put it on his channel. If I was him, that's what I would do. Shirov played b4. And I would guess, since Shirov beat Timman, again Mador's probably already put this game on his channel, but who knows when. Okay, so Evan's Gambit. Okay, so this I know. And the reason I know this particular variation is there was a famous game played, I think the same year, between Anand and Kasparov, and they played the same way, with the same result. Okay, and this was played in the Anand game, and I'm sure Timman knew it. Timman's a big theoretician. d6, bishop f6, and then material's equal now, because white sacrificed a pawn, and then black sacrificed his g-pawn. And now you can argue, is this queen well placed or badly placed? I mean, the queen's like sort of trapped. It doesn't, but on g3 you can't attack it, and it looks okay. White's pawn structure is a little iffy with the separated pawns here. So it's a very strange, unusual position that favors Shirov. Okay, and it got more crazy and more unusual, which more than favors Shirov. Okay, castles, sacrificing his e-pawn, which looks suicidal to take, because my rook is going to line up with your queen and king. So he played bishop d7. If you're going to guess which way black castles, you're not going to guess king side. Castling king side is impossible. We can't play knight h6 because white takes it. And if we find a square for our knight, we still can't castle. What black wants to do is castle queen side and get a rook to g8. That's what black's hoping for. Okay, knight d4. This lets Shirov queen get off of g3, especially when black castles queenside, which he did. Knight d2, developing his knight. Knight c6, the knight was stupid on a5. And queen e3, he wants to play knight takes knight and queen takes a7. Moving the defender, Timman played h5 and said, I'm going to checkmate you, rawr. And if I was white in a blitz game, I would definitely play knight takes and queen takes a7. And the reason Timman played h5 was to stop bishop g4 check in case this happens. No bishop g4 check for white. The pawn on h5 stops that. Otherwise, knight takes knight and queen a7 would threaten bishop g4. There's no defense. White's going to checkmate black. Okay, so Timman saw that, and he said, yeah, put your queen offside. I don't care. And Shirov said, I'm going to play rook b1 first, then I'll do it. And Timman said, fine. He developed his last piece. And Shirov changed his mind and didn't play knight takes c6. Again, I would play knight takes c6, but that's me. Play queen d3, b6, blocking up the queen side, a4. Shirov likes to sacrifice, so he gives up another pawn, and queen a6 with the relatively obvious threat of queen takes knight because the b pawn is pinned. Now remember, Shirov is down 2 pawns, okay, so that's good for black. And Shirov played queen d4, queen g7, queen g3, queen e3, queen d3, queen a6. So don't show your chess coach this game. Don't say, white moved his queen 500 times and sacrificed 2 pawns. That's how I want to play. Okay, if you can calculate 10 moves ahead, then maybe you can play that way. Okay, Timman played king a8. Now queen takes knight just loses the queen. And Shirov played e5 because he hasn't sacrificed enough pawns yet. He's only sacrificed 2. And this is a clearance sacrifice. It's very similar to his d4 last game. He wants to play bishop f3 check, which is very annoying to black. Okay, so he takes, bishop f3 check, white's up 3 pawns, or white's down 3 pawns, and d5. And Shirov plays knight c4, because of course he played knight c4. Okay, confusing the audience, which is us. Well, you can't take with a pawn, that's illegal. And the knight's threatening e5 and a5. And if you play knight takes knight, I can take with the queen, threatening the d5 pawn. and getting rid of black's defense on the queen side. So he played bishop c8, and he said, oh, your queen's almost trapped. You're going to have to escape with your queen. And so there's two ways to escape with your queen. There's the normal way, queen b5. Then there's the Shirov way. Can you find the Shirov way to get your queen out of harm's way? If you're watching on YouTube, pause the video and try to find the move Shirov played, getting his queen away from bishop takes queen. And we're back. The answer is queen takes a5. Okay, confusing everybody on YouTube. And the idea, which didn't happen, is if you take this, white plays knight c6, threatening rook b8 mate. Black can easily stop rook b8 mate by moving his bishop. Then the rook defends. But then your queen is attacked, and I can take with this knight, and I'm actually going to be up a piece. And there's a very long, complicated variation, which I'm just seeing now. Bishop f5, knight takes, takes the rook, takes the knight, threatening rook takes b1, and if rook takes bishop, we have knight f7, threatening the rook, the other rook, and the bishop. And also, if I take the bishop, you're sort of in a mating net. You got to watch it. And I'm sure Shirov saw all this when he played queen takes a5, maybe even before that. Okay, so Timman didn't like that because Timman has black, so he doesn't want any of that. So he played queen takes d4, confusing everybody. And that's called a desperado. If you want to know what a desperado is, then listen to the Eagles. Then you'll know what it is. Okay, so he's taking the knight, and now white can't play knight c6 with that mating stuff. So if I take your queen, he takes my queen, and black is still up 2 pawns. Black's up 2 pawns. Okay. And, black has reasonable position. So instead, Shirov played queen a2, defending his knight. The pawn can't take because it's illegal. And if you take with the queen, you can't recapture because your pawn's pinned. And white's threatening pawn takes queen. So Timman regained his 3-pawn advantage. Now he has 3 extra pawns, and also black has 4 connected passed pawns on the queen side. Okay, and Shirov looked at his watch and he said, man, I haven't sacrificed in like a move or two. We got to start sacrificing. This is crazy. So he played bishop e3, and then he's like, I wonder which piece I'm going to sack on b6. Okay, and he's going to sack one of his pieces on b6 and get to that black king. So Timman protected his king with bishop b7, and Shirov decided to sack his bishop. And now you're threatening queen takes a7 mate. So Timman said, all right, I'll take that. Knight takes check. The only legal move is king b8. And then knight takes d5, confusing the audience. Notice the bishop is pinned again. The king's not on a8 anymore. So this knight is sufficiently protected. And now we have lots of stuff going on. We're going to move our knight away next move, and b7's attacked. And we're also threatening knight takes queen. I don't see a good move here for black, and neither did Timman. So even though black is up a piece for no pawns, and it's black's turn to move, he actually resigned here because there's nothing to do. There's no move black can play where he's either defending this bishop on f6 or saving this bishop on b7. For example, let's just move the queen somewhere, I don't know, here. Then I play knight takes f6, white's threatening rook takes b7 and bishop takes b7, and material's equal. And there's no defense. You think these guys are going to defend? No. So Shirov got at the king. He kept sacking and attacking, and eventually he crashed through. And I mean, Timman was one of the top 10 players in the world for 20 years, but the Shirov attack was too strong. Too many sacrifices and too much open king for black. Now, if you guys go home and you're like, I'm going to sack all my pieces, okay, then you're going to be down a lot of pieces because you don't calculate as well as Shirov. So don't do that. Like, save some of your pieces. And by getting open lines like files and diagonals, black's king is toast. Hopefully vegan toast. Okay, and the most famous thing Shirov ever did, which I assume, and when I assume these things, I'm not right usually. I assume more than half the people watching have seen this. And usually, people on YouTube haven't seen the stuff that I think they've seen. You know, like the Morphy versus the Count and the Duke, the opera game. I assume you've seen that. Okay, I assume you've seen this. This is the most famous thing Shirov has ever done. We'll flip the board. Okay, this is a game with Topalov in Linares 1998. Okay, and in this position, black's up 2 pawns. Black has 2 connected pawns, or 2 disconnected pass pawns. I almost said the right thing. And in this position, white has good drawing chances because opposite color bishops, and it's hard to get these pawns in. Now immediately, white has to get his king to a good square. If white plays king d4 or king d2, something like that, he should be able to draw actually. There's no way that black can break through the defense. So obviously, Topalov played king g1, and here comes the king. And even though this game was played 26 years ago, yeah, that's right. People still talk about it today. Because in this position, Shirov made his most famous move ever. And whenever I play this move, I always say this is better than Shirov's, but I'm kidding. Okay, now I looked at it with the engine for about 3 minutes, and at depth like 38, the strong engine, Stockfish 16, it said this is the only winning move. And it says other moves, black is up +1. +1 doesn't win these endgames. If the computer looks 30 moves ahead and says +1, that means you're not winning. That means you're 2 pawns up for nothing, but you can't win. If it saw a way to win the bishop or the queen, it would say some huge plus number. So in opposite bishop endings, when the engine says +1, usually that's a draw. And if you let it think forever, it should go to +5 or +10 if it sees eventually it's going to promote. However, after thinking maybe 6 seconds, it found Shirov's move. And then it said, oh, I'm winning. Go me. Okay, and this is the most famous move that Shirov's ever played, and probably one of the 5 most famous moves ever. Shirov played the relatively obvious, that was a joke, bishop h3, confusing the audience. Okay, and this does several things. Okay, it lets black's king move up, because the bishop was on f5 blocking it. And if white moves his king up to d4, which should draw, it doesn't draw anymore because I take the pawn on g2. So for example, if you go here, 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 haha, you stopped me. Then I take this, and I have 3 passed pawns. So now I'm going to win. 2 passed pawns, but 3 passed pawns. Okay, so white obviously takes the bishop, and then king f5, and black's going to get in king e4. And that was the only way to get king e4 in, was to make white lose a tempo by taking the bishop. Now black has something else here. Not only is black's getting his king up here, which he couldn't do without bishop h3, but he also gave himself another passed pawn. So those 3 passed pawns are going to win the game, although they didn't because Topalov took one of them. So king f2, king e4, and black's going to play d4, and then push this pawn, and push this pawn, push this pawn, and white's going to capitulate. There's passed pawns all over the board. White can't stop them all. So Topalov said, I'll take that one. That seems good. Okay, and then in this position, Shirov played d4. Now, if it's black's move, a3 wins immediately. So you don't have time for king e2, because I play a3, a2, a1. Close, but not close enough. Almost. Okay, so he only has one good move, bishop e7, stopping a3. Now, if this pawn moves, the king can come stop it. But he moved his king up in the endgame. king d3. And his 2 passed pawns are actually enough to win the game because the bishop can't leave the diagonal. If the bishop leaves the diagonal, I queen. So white's bishop is totally tied down. That lets this pawn queen. If you could imagine the position without the bishop and without the pawn, then this king and pawn just easily queen. Well, that's what black does because the bishop has to babysit the pawn on a4. So he played bishop c5, and he said, haha, you can't play king c2 because I take it. I wonder if he said that. King c4, bishop has to go stay on that diagonal, and then he plays the brilliant king b3. So if white doesn't move, black is going to play king c2. If white doesn't make any move here, king c3 would probably get the same thing done as king b3. And now, let's say we play king here, for example. This is the position Topalov actually resigned. Play here, I go here. Now I'm threatening this. And once I play d3, if your bishop controls d2, I can just push my pawn. And when you take my pawn, then I play d2. So the bishop can't stop both pawns, and the white king is doing nothing. The white king isn't stopping the pawns. And even though black sacrificed a bishop, these pawns are useless. This one pawn stops both pawns. So now black is going to play king c2 and d3 and a3 and 2 pawns. The white king doesn't do anything, and the white bishop can't stop them both. So in this position, Topalov resigned. And the only question, which I'd never seen a definitive answer to, but I'll give you one, was bishop h3 the only winning move? And I think it is. I think the 2-pawn ending that black has is not winning, but the one he's down the bishop wins because he has a passed f-pawn and he gets his king up here. So by getting his king to e4 and making white lose another tempo to take the f-pawn, black had just enough to win. Even that was close. So a brilliant move from Shirov, bishop h3, and that's one of the reasons Shirov is famous today. Anyway, you should buy Shirov's books, Fire on Board and Fire on Board 2, where he discusses his best games. And obviously, his analysis of his games in book form is better than my 45 minutes of briefly looking at his games, because he knows what he analyzed, and he can say, I thought this, and I thought my opponent would do that, and we both missed this, and it's more interesting if the author is writing about their own games. I'm Grandmaster Ben Feingold. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. If you want to sponsor a lecture, contact my wife Karen. Her email address is karen@atlchessclub.com. And I'll see you next time with more great players of the present. And I want to thank Rob Veneris, our sponsor. He not only sponsored the lecture, he's actually watching it. A lot of our sponsors don't watch the lecture, but he's a chess fan like Shirov, and he wanted to see it live, unlike you guys. All right, see you next time. Bye.